Hello, welcome to Inside the Tape with Greg Cosell on Inside the Birds, presented by Green Lawn Fertilizing. And we're excited to have Green Lawn Fertilizing on board to bring you all of the Birds' big game coverage leading off to kickoff. I'm Geoff Mosher alongside Adam Caplan, and joining us every week to break down the tape of the Eagles game, it's NFL Film senior producer Greg Cosell. He's also the star of ESPN's NFL Matchup Show and the Inside the Birds pregame show. Fellas, the Eagles are headed to the Super Bowl. You may have heard it's going to be the second time in 3 years, and they're going to play the Kansas City Chiefs once again. But to get there, they first had to beat the Washington Commanders in the NFC Championship game last Sunday at the Link, and they did with a 55-23 blowout. So, Greg, the first thing I want to start with you is you watched this game knowing that this was a one win, one loss matchup between the two during the regular season, and then you get a really lopsided victory. Did the tape show anything about a change in approach, mentality, anything from the Eagles standpoint that, besides the 4 turnovers that they were able to produce, led to the results that they had?
Well, I would say this. I think the score was lopsided. I'm not sure the game was.
Good point.
Because don't forget, it was relatively close through the third quarter. So, and turnovers, obviously the turnovers were really big. And you can't count on those. You can't predict those in any given game. So they were a huge, huge factor in the game. Now, I mean, I think defensively, the Eagles did some things that, they, in this particular game, they played. I mean, they mixed their coverages quite a bit in this game. They don't blitz a lot. They only rushed 5 on 7 of Daniel's 55 dropbacks. Obviously, there did reach a point middle to late third quarter where Daniels pretty much had to throw on every play. But the Eagles are not a heavy blitz team. They weren't during the season. So, it was. I wouldn't say this game was a blowout in the way the game was played. Obviously turnovers change everything and you can never predict those. But I think in the way the game was played, it wasn't really a blowout. So, I'm not sure I would agree with that part of it. But I think the Eagles, for the most part, the Eagles have a defined identity. I think in this game, they probably threw the ball a little more, but everything was pretty, I don't want to say safe. That's not the right word, but relatively risk averse based on the overall structure of their offense.
Greg, speaking of their offense, the offensive line obviously had the big injury situation in the middle.
Yep.
So how do you think the guys who played center and guard, how do you think everything held up, and how physical was this game for those guys?
Well, I think the Eagles make every game physical because I think that's built into how they play. I thought Steen struggled in this game. He certainly struggled early, and then he also had some bad snaps throughout the game. I can remember one in the third quarter. I think it was a pass pro snap that was poor, but he struggled definitely early. Settled in a bit, and ultimately didn't hurt them in any meaningful way, obviously. And I thought Dickerson, who's played center before, obviously, so that wasn't a brand new position for him. He was a college center, as most people probably know. He's fine. And then when Juergens came in, I thought he was fine. My guess is both guys will play in the Super Bowl. I don't think there's going to be any big issues, but yeah, I mean, the Eagles offense, look, we've talked about this all year. They get big plays in their run game. That's the bottom line. They get big plays in their run game, and that's, I think we mentioned this with the Patreon group that, here the Commanders come out, they go 18 plays, they convert 2 fourth downs, they control the ball for more than 7 minutes, and they're probably thinking they've got a really good handle on the way the game's going to be played. Not that they feel that, they won the game just because they won 18 plays, but that the game is kind of going the way they'd like it to go. Okay, and then bam, what happens? That's the way the Eagles play. I mean, Barkley has given them something that, number one, no one expected, but number two, it's been unbelievable. I mean, you could almost go back to, games early in the season when we weren't quite sure what the Eagles were going to be. I mean, I know they went into the bye 2-2, but think about week 3 against New Orleans when you're early in the fourth quarter and, the game's close and we're uncertain as what the Eagles offense is. And bam, Barkley goes 65, I think it was 65 yards, give or take. 65 yards for a touchdown. I mean, this is what they developed into as the season progressed, that they could make big plays in the run game, which percentage-wise, the NFL hasn't really been about, and most people never thought that that's the way you could get to a Super Bowl.
Right. So let's talk about this Eagles offense. We'll get into the offense against the Commanders defense because I believe, Greg, when we did our two shows after the first two Commanders game, we talked about alternations between 11 and 12 early, and then they either settle in to one or the other. What did you notice about the way Kellen Moore decided he was going to attack the Commanders defense from the start of this game?
Well, the Eagles' game plan was definitely high percentage 11 personnel. It ended up being a lot more 12, but if you just look at the first half, when you're truly that's your game plan, okay? So in the first half, they ran 30 plays out of 11 personnel and only 5 plays out of 12 personnel. As I said, that changed in the second half because the game changed. Right. But they clearly came in. Look, they knew the Commanders were going to pretty much play nickel. They play a lot of nickel. They sort of settled into that as the season progressed. They didn't play a lot of base, and obviously they were missing Payne as well. So, they knew they were going to get nickel. And the thing is, a lot of teams feel they can run against nickel because that nickel slot corner, and in the case of Iggy, he's not a big physical player. There are some nickels that are like DeJean, but he's not. So, the Eagles can run the ball out of any personnel package. Obviously, we've seen that all season long. I mean, that's what they do. I mean, the 60-yard touchdown on the first play of the game came out of 11, and it was a 3-by-1. I mean, it was 11 personnel. So it was Commanders conventional nickel. They had Iggy on the field.
Greg, staying on offense here with Hurts, the last game against Washington, it looked a little bit like the 22 season in where he was feeling it on those downfield throws on the outside. As we move forward here, Spags knows him. They saw him 2 years ago. Hurts played extremely well against him in the Super Bowl. What do you think Spags will try to do here to make sure this doesn't happen to them again?
Again, now all I'm giving you is speculation because none of us have any idea.
Yeah.
Spags is an aggressive defensive play caller, and he's a big believer in press. And Trent McDuffie over the last month or so has been exclusively an outside corner. He does not play in the slot. Chamari Connor is their slot corner. Their big nickel, he's a combination of both. On the other side, they play a combination of Johnson and mostly Watson, who's now back. Would I be surprised if he said, you know what, I'm going to line up in press, and I'm going to press on the outside, and I'm going to play the run with as many bodies as I can and see if what the Eagles will do. But now, this is where the chess match comes in because there's a part of me that also believes that the Eagles wouldn't let that happen, like by formation and motions, and they're not just going to let that happen. This is the fun to me of football. There's so many. It's funny, as you guys probably know, now that the Eagles are in the Super Bowl. Everybody, is asking me, I get my wife's friends asking me, well, who's going to win? Who's going to win? Like I know the answer to these questions, because there's so many variables in these games that, we could talk about, and, we'll probably do that for the pregame, but, you just don't know the answer. All you can do is go by what teams have done. Like we know that Spags likes to press. He's not all of a sudden going to play soft coverage, but he's also not going to press on every play. And the Eagles know this about Spags. Spags has been in the league a long time. And as we always say, coaches coach against coaches.
Yep.
So the Eagles are going to do some things that minimize the ability to just line up and play press. I mean, look, the first play of the game, they were in tight bunch, okay? It's hard to press tight bunch.
Well, also, when we talk about where Jalen was throwing the ball, I think you noted this with our Patreon. 20 completions, 20 for 28. Great. The ball placement, precision was very good. But you noted that, was it every single throw or nearly every throw was an outside the numbers throw?
Every throw. He did not throw one ball between the numbers.
Wow, it's amazing we can win a game by 30 points in the NFL doing that. I mean, that's fantastic.
I mean, if I said to you guys or anybody who, even coaches and said, hey, we're going to run a pass game where we never throw the ball between the numbers ever in the game. I'm sure most coaches would say you can't do that. You can't have a pass game like that.
Mhm.
Now, he missed a couple, he does. I mean, a lot of quarterbacks do. Jalen certainly has never been super comfortable throwing the ball between the numbers, certainly against zone coverage. And he missed a couple in this game. I think two that I remember distinctly. But you know what? Not everything, but the large majority of what they do works off the fact that he's in the gun and Barkley's next to him. Because think about that. You've got the zone read element available on every possible play. Okay, it's there. You have to defend that, and that means you have to defend that with how you align your personnel, and then you have the inside zone element, which comes off, potentially the zone read as well. So there's a lot of elements to their offense that make them difficult to defend and can present really define reads and throws for the quarterback. And that's what you're trying to do. That's not a knock on Jalen Hurts. This is what you're trying to do as a coaching staff. And I thought they did it in this game as well as they've done it all year in the biggest game of the season. And Hurts executed at a high level. Within the context of their offense. And we've talked about this before, which cannot be overstated. They never turn the ball over.
Yep. Always careful.
You can't overstate that. Believe me, and the way the games play out, they're never behind. If they're behind, it's 10-7. They're never behind by 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Yep, right.
So there's no need to make risky throws. People can sit here and say, well, Jalen doesn't turn it loose. My guess is, and I've said the same thing, by the way, we all have, even coaches that you guys talk to have said that. But my guess is they're perfectly comfortable as a coaching staff in the context of this team, not as an abstraction if you're just talking about quarterback play, but in the context of this team where, hey, if he doesn't turn the throw loose and runs to his right and throws it away, they're not viewing that as, oh my God, what the hell is he doing? They're viewing it more as, you know what? He didn't turn it over, and we're going to run another play now.
For the next play, right?
Yeah.
But yet, Greg, what I find interesting is, yet he loves the downfield throw, which is, by the way, but
it's outside the numbers, Adam.
Right, and that's what he loves. Numbers. Right, but it's downfield, and he loves that throw.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Fourth down throw is,
It's technically not it's not an easy throw. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's an easy throw.
Yeah.
It's not a risky throw. Like, it's not going to be intercepted.
Because it's one-on-one, he's getting the look that he wants.
Yeah.
And that ball comes out. Like that to me.
I mean, look at the one he hit Brown on was
31 yards on fourth down. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's not a risky throw. Yeah, that was 4th and 5 late in the second quarter. It was their fourth possession. They knew they were going to get man. I mean, that's you're getting man. And that's one-on-one. It was one-on-one Brown versus Lattimore. And Brown, of course, is as good as there is in the league on those kinds of plays. That's not a risky throw in the way you think of risky throws.
Yep.
Greg, last thing on the offense, because Adam and I have talked about this quite a bit. When healthy, A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert are not only good pass catchers, but they bring a physicality. They are hard to tackle. They can block. They can do. Yeah. They're strong players. And I thought that this game, and I was going to ask you if it jumped out, that the physicality of having both those guys healthy and being a big part of the game plan really jumped out at all.
Well, it started with the first play of the game. I mean, that was pin pull. And they lined up Brown. It was tight bunch. They obviously motioned Smith across the formation, which is as key a part of the play as there is because it removes a player in run support to the play side, and that was critical. But they asked Brown on the first play of the game to make a pin or a seal block on the defensive end Fowler. Now, is that a super hard block? Technically, no, because you have the angle and the leverage, but still, you're asking a wide receiver to block a defensive end. So that's part of, if you're going to run the ball as much as they do, your wide receivers at some point have to block. Now, they don't have to pancake people, but they have to block.
Right. All right, great stuff. So that is a look at the Eagles offense. Obviously, a very good passing attack that we saw, and we just talked about it. And just on a quick aside, and you already talked about Spags, but Our blitz beaters, some of the plays that the Eagles ran that we'll take a look at on clips, those are going to be pretty essential, I would assume, against Beggs because he will come at you with some exotic looks and fronts.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to know what those are. Now, there'll be some, some stuff that is a little different. That's what teams do. But I mean, they know he's going to blitz, and they know that if he'll blitz, certain formations. I mean, they'll know all this. It doesn't mean you handle it with no problem, but they'll know.
Right.
And Geoff, the thing for him is, and we've seen this occasionally this season, compared to last year where he just wouldn't do it, but he's been willing to check it down a little bit more this year, Jalen. So that to me is essential. If they're bringing it, don't overthink it. Sometimes he wants to make the big play. Get rid of the football. Just dump it off to Barkley, or Gainwell, assuming he gets cleared for the concussion. And we know that they're good catching the football.
Absolutely. All right, well, Eagles fans might be stressed out over a rematch against these dynastic Chiefs, but you shouldn't be stressed out about your lawns this spring because of our friends at Green Lawn Fertilizing. They can help. They're based right here in the Philadelphia area, and these guys are the experts in the region's conditions, including PA, New Jersey, and Delaware. They know how tough that drought was last year, and they've created a custom blend and approach that will help your lawn recover. We all remember how tough it was late last spring, last summer. As the drought continued, you would see one brown lawn after another. It was starting to look like we lived in Arizona at one point. I mean, I thought I was in the desert with all the brown lawns that we were seeing. But with Green Lawn Fertilizing, you don't have to worry about that. They will take care of you and they will manicure your lawn to perfection. So be sure to sign up now to get 10% off. And I'm told this is a very limited time offer. So head to the link that's in the description box of this podcast or YouTube show and go, or you can go to greenlawnfertilizing.com/inside-the-birds to take advantage. If you want to stress, worry about Jalen Hurts, maybe throwing a turnover or interception once in a while. Worry about Landon Dickerson's knee or Kenny Gainwell. Hope that they recover, but do not be worried or stressed out about your lawn. Just call Green Lawn Fertilizing today. All right, Greg, we're going to talk about the Eagles defense now against the Commanders. Now, this is one of those games, and you mentioned blowout in score, but in complexion of the game, the Commanders moved the ball fairly well, including an 18-play drive to start the game. But obviously, they got to feel good about how they move the ball, but they're probably just kicking themselves over ball security. But what did you see for them to be able to move the ball fairly well against the Eagles defense?
Well, it was a lot of short plays. They didn't really have big plays. And I'm not saying that you want to give up an 18-play drive, Geoff. No one does. But, I think you're feeling like in some ways that's okay because they ended up with 3 points, and they controlled the ball. And like I said, the Commanders probably felt pretty good about the fact that they were able to control the ball, convert some fourth downs. They were short fourth downs, but I don't think that, I didn't watch that tape going, man, they are just dominating that Eagles defense. That's not the way it was at all,
Right.
And I thought Daniels made some good throws. I mean, there was one where I think, was it Brown that he hit? It might have been on the possession after the fumble where he stuck one in the window. That's a really hard throw. Yeah, they made a couple of good plays. I mean, Ertz had some big numbers, but again, there were no really big explosive plays,
Right.
and it's hard against that defense. It's a really good defense. It's hard to go 12, 13, 14 plays and score touchdowns. That's the bottom line. I mean,
Adam and I talk about this all the time. That's what Vic Fangio wants you to do. He dares you to work the ball, death by 1,000 cuts, and see if you can do it without turning the ball over.
I mean, you're being patient. Flip talked about that. John D. Flip told us it several times. He goes, when you go against Fangio, you must be patient.
Yeah.
He's going to make you bleed. He's going to make you try to make the big play, and then you turn it over.
Right. So. And look, I'm not saying anything profound, but then you have to score touchdowns. I remember in years ago when Peyton Manning was at his best, okay, and everybody used to say, and I think I was writing articles then for the old Sporting News, and everybody said that, well, you got to control the ball. And I said, okay, that's great. And that in and of itself is not a bad thing, okay? But let's say you cut down their possessions, even by 2, which would be a lot in a game, and they get 9 possessions instead of 11. Okay, let's just take that argument. You have to score touchdowns because let's say that you control the ball, do all those wonderful things, but you don't score enough touchdowns. And because they were so great at that time, it seemed like they scored every drive. And on their 9 possessions, they score 4 or 5 touchdowns. So they could have 35 points, even if you're theoretically controlling the game. So, it's a tough deal. The fact that they only ended up with 3 on the first drive, no one probably thought about it in great detail at the time because, hey, there's a lot of game left. There's still, 6, 7 minutes left in the first quarter. No one's thinking about it. But in some ways, that and the very next play changed the whole complexion of the game.
Yep.
That's
really great.
If you're going to control the ball for that long against an offense that can make big plays, you better score touchdowns.
Greg, one of the things we talked about in our pregame show, I know you brought it up, is the Commanders' use of no huddle. How do you think how did the Eagles do last week? How did their defense do against it?
I thought they did fine. I mean, I think I made a note of how many no huddle plays there were too, just because I think that obviously was a big deal. I'm trying to find it in my notes, but yeah, obviously they were in no huddle quite a bit. That's who they are. So that was not a surprise to the Eagles at all. That's what they do. Now, the Eagles, for the most part, pretty much lined up. I don't want to say every play. It wasn't every single play, but a high percentage of the plays where they started in a 2 high shell structure. And, that's what they do. And then you can do a lot of things from that. They did play, they certainly played some cover, single high. It was predominantly cover 1, some cover 3, some 1 robber. But they also played a mix of 2 high where there's a lot of different coverages that have 2 high safeties. So, they mix things up. They didn't really allow, they allow a couple of, the big plays were not really down the field plays. Like obviously the McLaurin 36-yard touchdown. That was a delayed slant versus Slay, and it had run after catch. And you could argue Blankenship took a bad angle. He took too flat an angle, but they didn't really hit big plays down the field.
Right. And because the team no huddles, it prevents substitutions a lot of times. So you didn't see a whole lot of rotating on the Eagles front line, right? Because Jordan Davis, I don't believe, played a whole lot of snaps. Jalen Hunt did play, but 13 snaps, which is a perfect example. He did not play a whole lot. And I don't know how I think Bryce Huff was only in there just for a few snaps. So it's a testament, Greg, to your point that the Eagles are a great conditioned team to be able to stay kind of in their front that they have to play against that and their 2-shell structure and be able to withstand the no huddle and make the stops that they needed to stop.
Yeah, it's they don't substitute a lot anyway, really. The only people they really substitute is on their D line. Right. They don't really have a lot of substitute. They're a heavy nickel team, and that's what they evolved into over the course of the season. Keep in mind they played nickel on 73 of the Commanders' 77 offensive plays. They're a nickel defense.
Right. Good stuff. Last thing on the offense. On the Eagles defense. You had mentioned Zach Ertz having a big game, 11 for 104. Is there anything to look into that?
No.
As far as
I know what you're going to say.
Going against the Chiefs.
And there's not. That's not going to be the way it is. I'm not saying Travis Kelce's not going to have a good game. Don't get me wrong. But
you're saying they're not going to defend the same way.
It's apples and oranges when you're comparing how it's going to play out. It's not the same thing. That's true in most cases when people say, oh, in the last 2 weeks, this team's really given up, yards or whatever to this guy. Well, that's all apples and oranges. That's totally, totally different. The Eagles are not, I'm not going to say they're not going to allow Kelce to beat them. That's ridiculous. A lot of teams think that way, and Kelce beats them. The guy's a first famer with the best playoff numbers in history. So I'm not going to be stupid and say that Kelce's not going to be a factor, but it's not going to play out the same way in terms of tactics is what I'm talking about, and schematics. Right.
So let's look at a different tight end right now. We're going to look at the Eagles tight end, Dallas Goedert. You have mentioned Greg a lot, and I think in this game it was pretty evident too. What the Eagles can do off their running game or off their zone read element, correct?
Oh, yeah.
This is pretty early in the game, first quarter, where Goedert is going to wind up getting pretty much wide open because of, I'm assuming, right, what the Eagles are showing versus what Washington thinks is going to happen here.
So now,
All
by the way, I thought they made great use of motion in this game, both in the run game and the pass game, and they didn't necessarily run more snaps of motion than they have in some other games, but I thought it was super effective in this game. They probably had a good tell. Look, it's a division opponent. It's Dan Quinn. They probably had a really good feel for how he was going to play. You know, I've talked to coaches through the years, as you guys have. Most coaches know what the other team's going to do. You know, there's not a lot of surprise. Every once in a while, hey, they showed us one thing. You know, they had a linebacker where they normally have a safety, or they had this guy. But I mean, for the most part, you know, no one's reinventing the wheel here. So I love the way they use motion here because, first of all, by the way, I can't remember. Was this no huddle?
No, the next play I believe was no huddle.
Okay, because if you look at this play, go back before the motion. Just look pre-snap. The look of the safety and the two corners says pretty much zone because it's a post safety with corners way off, playing with width and depth. That's not a man coverage look. Okay, it's a zone look. So now they send Smith in motion across the formation. Notice that Lattimore, and by the way, he played right corner the whole game, and Sanders still left corner. All they do is bump. That's a zone reaction. They're bumping. They're not matching. Okay. So now what has to happen here? The Eagles know if they send Brown and Smith on vertical releases, okay, they know that those two defenders, they have to react to them. Certainly the corner's going to because he's responsible for a vertical route. And the flat defender has to react because otherwise they don't have enough people to play the two verticals. So they run inside zone run action. So everybody is tightened to play the run. And then this is beautiful. This is just pitch and catch. You know, again, this takes nothing away from Hurts, but you know, this is just really good offense. I mean, it's just smart, simple, basic offense. You get 10 yards, you move the chains. It's easy. You know, this is just really good.
Jeff, they're taking advantage of spacing. Look at the spacing.
Yeah.
That they
right
have.
here.
That's good design. And as Greg said, look how off they're playing. Get out of Jalen's hands quickly. Let Goedert run after the catch. This is great. It's great.
Yep, it's amazing. He's wide open, and yet as soon as he gets the ball, you got five guys around him. But the spacing was perfect. Like
look at but his run after the catch, Jeff. Boy, did they miss that when he's not playing.
Yeah.
No offense to Calcaterra, but this guy's a beast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, I mean, I mentioned to the Patreon group, and I'll mention it again, you know, hopefully different listeners or more listeners, is that, you know, I thought that Kellen Moore did an unbelievably great job in this game, both use of motion, formations, play calls. I mean, and I don't get into play calls exactly other than when I see them, you know, but I'm not there during the week. But I mean, the way it played out, it was pretty. I mean, he did a really, really good job. He defined reads and throws for Jalen. I'm not saying it was easy. I would never say that. It's never easy to play quarterback in the NFL, no matter what the situation is. You know, I sit here with a clicker. I'm not naive enough to think that, you know, hey, you should be doing this. You know, I mean, that's too hard. You know, that happened a lot with everybody's an expert on the Josh Allen play and what he should have done when he has two guys running at him immediately before he could take a breath and everybody decided they know exactly what he should do, you know. So I don't do that, but I mean, they did such a good job of defining things and attacking a defense that they probably felt very comfortable knowing what they were going to get.
All right, and we also talked, Greg, about sequencing and how you follow up one play, positive play versus another. So on the very next play,
20-yarder to Smith?
It is. This is the very next play where they no huddle.
This is beautiful. Okay, you're getting a sense from early in the game that you're getting a lot of off coverage. Okay, you're not getting press. So now this time it's a too high shell. Okay, but look at the corners. They're off. This is a zone look. Look at the 3 second level defenders. There's no sense of pressure here, of real pressure. They could rush 5, which I think they did, but it's not one of those oh my God pressures. You got 5 offensive linemen. It's not a big deal. So what they do here is, which is really good for quarterbacks, is they run mirrored routes. So and look at the formation. It's balanced. Okay, it's 12 balanced. Excuse me, 11 balanced. So you've got, and by balanced, we mean that you've got two wing players, you've got two wide receivers with basically the same splits, okay? Same distance from, from the tackles. So what they're going to do is run two outcuts by the wide receivers at the intermediate levels. They're going to run two drag routes underneath by the wing players and a sit route right in front of Jalen Hurts if, all goes to hell and he's got to throw it right in front of him. So it's mirrored routes. So basically you're saying to Jalen, pick a side. Pick a side where you want to throw it to an outside receiver. And he chooses Smith. Again, only he knows why. My guess is he chose Smith because it just looked cleaner. Because the underneath defender to Brown side up top looks like he's starting to get depth, whereas the underneath flat defender down below, the second level player, Geoff, he's not getting any. He's still responding as if he's playing the run. So it just looks cleaner. And it's pitch and catch. This is beautiful. And it's
again,
by the way, it's a great route by Devonta Smith.
Yeah, I like how mirrored routes. You're right, the exact same route tree on each side of the field.
Thing. It's two outcuts, it's two drag routes, and it's a sit route right in front of them. It's mirrored routes.
And these are throws that Jalen, we always say so well: timing, precision, accuracy. He was able to plant the back foot right there. Bam,
deliver the
ball
football.
down. And look, there's even a slight little bit of pressure over, I guess, right tackle. That is, I guess, it's a stunt, or I don't know. The end tries to go inside.
So I was wrong. They only rushed 4, not 5. So this was so yeah. So I mean, this is.
I mean, in the protection, Geoff. I mean, he's getting up to he's getting at least 3 seconds here. He's the ball's out around 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So
absolutely,
what you're after.
Nice catch too. Nice catch and stay in bounds.
Footwork, yes.
Although
was that
well done. It's really
the play? Was that the play when they thought Smith was out of bounds?
Yes.
He was out of bounds.
And he might have been, but you know what? It wasn't called.
They didn't call it. I knew that was coming. You know where that's from? So sitting in with Jaws and Greg, they watch the tape and then they go, "Oh wow, that's a missed call," but they didn't call it, so it's not a penalty.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
there you go. All right, time to take a look at the defense a little bit, Greg. And we did those two clips just to illustrate the sequencing. Those are two back-to-back plays where you're right. They recognized the coverage, it was zone, and they were able to get good spacing and find the openings and get the ball out of Jalen's hands.
Yeah, and that one
very quickly.
As you say, Geoff, that was no huddle. And
right.
I made a note of the no huddle. They ran 20 of 66 plays out of no. This I thought was interesting and important. Let me just say this before we go to the defense, if I could.
Sure.
The Eagles ran 20 of 66 plays out of no huddle. They all came out of 11 personnel, and 18 of those 20 plays came on either first down, 11 of them, or second down, 7 of them. So, that's the way they kind of do their no huddle. And Hurts was 7 for 11 for 93 yards out of the no huddle, all coming on first and second down.
Greg, before we move on, studying him this season compared to the last season or the season before, is there a formation you think he's really good? Is he better out of 11, 12? Is there do you find any comfortability, or does it really anything noticeable, or no?
It's a hard question. I don't have a great answer for that, so I don't want to make it up. I don't have a
problem.
That.
But he likes no huddle, though. You've talked about that a lot.
Thing to study in the off season, and I'm sure they'll study it as well. This is what teams do in the off season when they self scout, because that's the first thing teams do. Obviously, the Eagles aren't doing that right now. They're preparing for a Super Bowl, and that's why, Adam, and when you go to the combine and you talk to the two teams, the coaches that were in the Super Bowl, and they're so far behind in terms of college players because they've got to do their own study of their own team first. Then you have free agency, those teams rely on the scouts almost more than any other team because the coaches just don't have time to get to these college players till much later in the process.
Right, but real quick, so you've said consistently that Jalen is very comfortable out of hurry up or tempo. Seems to be.
A lot of quarterbacks really like it because the defense, you're not going to get 5, or 10 different defensive looks. You're just not.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And plus, you might catch them off guard 2 or 3 times.
Right.
And really
there's times guys are still trying to communicate sometimes when you see teams. Because don't forget, there's really 3 no huddles. There's quick no huddle where you snap it quick. There's sort of medium no huddle where, you kind of look it over and maybe you snap the ball with 16, 17, 18 seconds on the play clock. And then there's no huddle where, you don't snap it until, there's 2 seconds. But the defense doesn't know that. So they have to, they have to show themselves. They don't know that.
Right. All right, Greg, we're going to switch over to defense here. And, Oren Burks, I almost said Ellis Burks, the former Boston Red Sox outfielder, but
Good player. He's
Oren
a pretty good
Burks,
player too.
Yeah.
I've been doing this a lot lately with names where
I think he
last
played
week
for
it
the
was Heath.
Expos too, didn't he? Didn't he play for the Expos too?
He did,
Yeah.
he did. Last week I
Right-handed
did
power hitter.
Yeah.
Last week I did Jeff Heath instead of Malik Heath. So I don't know. I just hear last names and I say
Jeff
the first guy
Heath.
that pops into my head.
Former safety for the Cowboys, sure.
Yeah, that was my mistake last week. So anyway, Oren Burks had to fill in here for obviously with N'Kobe D now. And you also talked, Greg, about the potential of seeing a little bit more air raid formations from
Here
Cliff
you go.
Kingsbury.
This is what
And here's an example. So why
And
don't
I
you set up
thought-
what we see here?
See, I thought the Eagles handled this really, really well because number one, they played with 6 in the box. The Lions played with 5 in the box, and that caused a big, big problem. And I thought that, number one, that in and of itself was just a smart way to approach. They were prepared for this because they've seen it on film, And Kingsbury again. Kingsbury has a track record. He's an air raid guy. You're going to expect this. But this is what I spoke about, where this is air raid. So people who love college football that are listening and watch Tennessee and other teams in college football, a big deal in the air raid is to go double stacks outside the numbers. You really spread it out as far as you can. And don't forget in college football with the hash marks wider, the two guys that are outside stacked to the wide side of the field, they seem like they're in a different, area code. It's not quite the same in the NFL, but it's still spread quite a bit.
Right. So you got they're all spread out here. And as you mentioned, Greg, the Eagles have 6 in the box, though. And you said the Lions tried to defend this with 5?
Yep.
Interesting.
And Eckler had a 35-yard run against it in the, in that playoff game.
So I imagine, though, the Commanders still think we got 6 and we have, we'll have at some point the way we run our blocking scheme, we're going to try to create a numbers advantage.
Well, they're still feeling good because just like with the Eagles with Hurts, you've got the zone read element here. So somebody has to be responsible for Jaden Daniels because he could, if Jaden Daniels is, let's say, going to run to the boundary side of the formation, okay? Let's say he decides to do that. They just take these 2 wide receivers that are stacked to the boundary and they run them vertically. And those 2 Eagles, Slay, and I believe that's Blankenship, if I'm not mistaken. They got to run with them because they don't know what the play is. They got to run with them. They can't just say, oh, yeah, guys, you run, get on top of me and we're good. They got to run with them. So somebody's got to be responsible in this defense for Daniels. So if you decide to run inside zone here, to the field, as opposed, obviously you can't run it to the boundary because of where the back's offset. So you'd be running inside zone to the field. Then one defender is at least going to be removed. At least one. Sometimes 2 can be, but at least one's going to be removed. So you really are ending up with 5-on-5.
Right. And that's basically, as we roll the footage here.
And actually, Burks is the guy they're working off of here, and Burks does a great job because he's the defender that is that they're not blocking because they block Smith, which kind of surprised me. But hey, I'm not going to
agreed.
Kingsbury knows more than I do about his offense, so I'm not saying he's right or wrong. But to me, you'd want to send that right tackle up to get Burks and leave Smith alone because he's the furthest removed from the running play.
Right.
But,
and
hey,
Burks does a nice job here filling the hole.
Because Greg, you told us on Patreon with a group, I think earlier this week that because if someone asked that, last week you were talking about he wasn't seeing it as well. But then
a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, the last 2 weeks, I think he's played well.
Okay, so he's seeing it better. Good. Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Like right now, he's responsible for Daniels, so he's the unblocked defender in this particular concept by the Commanders. So if Daniels kept the ball, that's Burks' responsibility.
Right. And he kind of plays that middle too. He didn't completely break, contain, and crash the gap.
No, he didn't. He waited for Daniel.
Yep.
Now, because of the way the Eagles played it, though, if you just go back, you'll see that is that Ajomo on this play?
Yes.
Ajomo does a really good job of resetting the line of scrimmage, and he forces Eckler to cut back inside, so Burks can be in really good position to make this play. You see how he resets it a little bit, pushes it back a little bit. So now, because in an ideal world where you really want Eckler to go, is between the left guard and the left tackle. That's where you'd ideally like him to go, because then Burks becomes irrelevant.
Right. Great when you can get your number 4 DT to get in there and give you that. Good stuff by Ojomo, and even Carter kind of pushed. I guess the Ravens got back.
But if Ojomo didn't do that, Carter wouldn't have been relevant either. But
correct.
But so that's Ojomo was really good there, allowing Burks to make the play. But Burks played it really well.
I was watching it and I was wondering, Greg, to your point, if they were trying to go after Burks a little bit because they know he's only been in there for a little bit, and that's why they blocked Nolan Smith and left Burks unblocked.
It's possible.
Yeah. All right. And of course, we'll give you one more on Burks. And this is something Adam and I talked about, and Nick Sirianni, I guess, confirmed it. He's been showing his team footage of Peanut Tillman, the cornerback from the Bears. Greg,
the peanut punch.
The peanut punch. Yes, the peanut punch. That would be a very vital play.
An FBI agent, by the way.
Who he was.
Really?
Yeah. Is he still doing it?
He was at one point.
Yeah, he was. That's true. It's true.
Yeah.
Out of Louisiana, Lafayette.
I always have mixed feelings about this. Every team practices turnovers. It's just not just the Eagles. Obviously when it happens and people talk about it, like on the telecast, Brady talked about how they, Sirianni specifically mentioned this. He's not the only one who's mentioning this. And it's a great play. You can't go into the Super Bowl and say, you know what, we're going to get 3 turnovers, no problem. You can't count on that.
Right.
It's a great play. No knock on the play, but you can't count on this in every game.
I felt bad for Jaden Daniels. I thought he did a great job for a rookie of what we talked about, which is not forcing it, taking what was there, playing within the confines of what the offense is supposed to be against this kind of defense, and then this happens.
Yeah.
So can't do much about that.
I mean, even the first De'Ami Brown fumble, which I guess that was Baun. Was that Baun who knocked that one out, the first De'Ami Brown?
Yes, Baun did that. This one was Burks.
They were moving the ball. It was 7-3 at the time, I believe. Who knows? But they got a fumble.
And that is definitely a punch. I mean, that is an intentional swipe at the ball with the right hand as he's tackling. So that was a great
there's
job
no
there.
guarantee that you knock it out. It happened here.
And by the way,
exactly,
Geoff, Peanut Tillman one season had 10 forced fumbles. 10 for a quarterback. Yeah.
That is unheard. That's unbelievable.
It's funny about turnovers. I remember Charles Mann was on the matchup show for 1 year, 2 years, whatever. Yeah. So anyway, there was 1 year where the Redskins at the time won the Super Bowl. Maybe it was the 91 season with Rip, and I can't remember. That sounds about right. And they had something like 45 turnovers. And even Charles Mann knew. He said, you can't do that every year. That's not something you can count on. And I think the next year they had like 10. It's just, you can't count on that stuff. You coach it, but you can't count on it.
No doubt about it. Well, Greg, you can't count on any of us to give an accurate prediction of the Super Bowl. We have no idea who is going to win, but we do know we've got one more inside the tape left to go next week, and we'll see how that one shapes up. So want to thank everybody for watching, and of course our great friends at Green Lawn Fertilizing. That's it for Inside the Tape. For Greg Cosell and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. Catch you on the next one.